Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Cloud Defense EPL Duty Weapon Light. Yes, at long last, the EPL is available and shipping. I know a lot of people have been waiting for this, and I fear some people waited and then just gave up hope. But the light has finally been released. It is shipping, and I got one in. In fact, I pre-ordered 2 of them just to help the boys out. And as soon as I got it in, obviously put it on the firearm and started going through the testing process. Now, the big departure that we're seeing in weapon lights, and it's starting to become more commonplace, is we're switching over to rechargeable batteries. We've already seen Surefire do it, obviously Cloud, Mod Light. And the reason for that primarily is you can get more output out of a rechargeable battery in a 3-volt size, or I guess an 18350 size. In fact, the EPL uses an 18350C, but you can get more power out of those 3-volt-ish footprint batteries than you can out of a traditional disposable 3-volt like a 123A. So in order to get the horsepower that a lot of us want, both in candela and lumens, we're seeing the shift towards rechargeables, which some people don't really care for. A lot of people, especially on the mil LE side, still prefer at least a dual fuel system where batteries can be either rechargeable or they can be disposables based on availability, mission, and things like that. But we're looking at a weapon light that is ambidextrous, of course. The EPL Duty has a 6061 aluminum body with horsepower quoted at 1200 lumens and a very important number, 52,000 candela. And the beam hangs out in the more daylight side of things. It's not quite as true white as we see from some of the other lights that are out there. With that 18350C battery, they're quoting a 40-minute runtime, which I found to be pretty accurate in my testing. And it uses the same lens as their MCH handheld, which makes it, to my experience, sample size of a couple, pretty damn durable. And the hotspot, which is something that we'll see throughout the video, is more of a hybrid. It's not small, it's not pinpoint like you'd probably want on something for a little bit more longer range, but it's not like a garage or a halogen or a floodlight either, which means our candela, that 52,000 candela, is a good accurate measurement of what that hotspot is giving us. And just like most of the lights out there, you can replace the battery by removing the front. There's still some, obviously, lights out there that don't allow that. And one of the things I really appreciate about the body, one of the first things I appreciate about the body is it's a Torx locks, of course, and I've got replaceable recoil lugs. It comes with Glock, SIG, and a 1913, which is going to cover most of the bases for your compact or full-size guns. And the overall body length of the light isn't ungodly long while having a very deep reflector, which helps give us that candela and those lumens. The body sits really tight against the trigger guard depending on which gun you're going to put it on. Some guns have smaller trigger guards than others, which then we get into the accessory rail placement. Guns like this Staccato 4.5 have multiple interface points on the lug, but other guns like Glock, for example, has one. So it's going to sit deeper against those trigger guards, probably intentionally. So there's not a gap, and really the gap is more of an aesthetic thing, but it's more about reach with your support side hand and your activation, and also if you have to, being able to activate it with your primary hand, which is something you might have to do if you're shooting one-handed, or occupationally specific if you're running a shield or something like that. So even on guns that only have that one interface, that one recoil lug, the body sits really far to the rear. Even if you're changing the recoil lugs out from SIG to Glock to 1913, the body is going to be accessible for most size hands. I can't say all, but most size hands, of course, the gun to light relationship. Now, my normal testing process for almost all products is 2,000 rounds. For the EPL, I actually went over that considerably. And I wasn't testing it just on 9mm, although primarily most of the range time was spent shooting it on various 9mm handguns. I also included it and left it on the gun, especially my Staccato 4.5, teaching some classes. So I got to get it out there and get some more, I wouldn't say real-world reps, because that's a little bit different of a conversation, but I was able to get out in various environments, various lighting conditions, and test the overall output of the gun. Those of you who know that I like to measure lights not only on their performance, just in darkness, but also confronting various lighting conditions, the so-called photonic barriers. This is something that I set up in classes where I'll use various lighting sources to kind of make the range a little bit more realistic for the students, especially when it comes to PID. Being able to positively identify targets at realistic distances. And that's something that a weapon light has to be capable of. We've seen a trend in some thought processes where people want smaller lights because they're aesthetically flush to the gun and they may be just quote-unquote a little bit more concealable, which I get from a concealed carry standpoint. If you're carrying it in a duty holster, the light size is really kind of irrelevant and it shouldn't be a primary concern when choosing that light. So the first thing to notice about the EPL is its temperature is a noticeable departure for some of the other lights that you're used to. It's hanging out lower than that usual 6500K that we see a lot of light companies gravitate towards. So it's more of a warmer temp, and some people, they look at it and they're like, to the eye it doesn't seem as bright, which is just a human failing in the way that we process light. But it's actually still putting out that 1200 lumens and that 52,000 candela. And as we've seen, those warmer light temps actually cut through barriers a little bit better, depending on what the media is. Not just light barriers, but also dust and sand and smoke and fog. In my experience over many years of using weapon lights, that's very true. If we have a warmer temperature light, it does tend to handle those situations better. So even on a cold, clear, still, dark environment, be it outdoors naturally at night or indoors, if there's smoke or fog or dust in the air, those warmer temps do tend to see through them a little better, which is super important, especially in environments where you can't really move away from those things to actually illuminate what you're trying to see. When it comes to functionality, the only thing to talk about is the switches. And it was kind of the first thing, I don't want to say it bothered me, but it was a departure from what I'm used to. I love the activation method. It's straightforward. It's kind of a thumbs forward method. And if I want momentary, I just hold and release, hold and release, hold and release. If I tap it, it just goes on. And I do appreciate that because I'm a constant on shooter, although I do practice shooting momentary only. I think that these paddles are placed really well in comparison to some of the other paddles that are out there, because even if I do use a momentary only, I've got a positive place to apply that support hand pressure. And something I've seen with students on other types of lights when they're using momentary only is based on paddle design, they'll go ahead and hold it for that momentary only and they'll pull the trigger, fire that first, maybe that second round. And by the nature, the ergonomics of that paddle, their thumb will actually slip off the paddle and they'll have to re-engage. With the EPL, it's kind of like a gas pedal. It sits a little bit lower than I would like, but that's kind of unavoidable based on where the accessory rail is. So I'm pressing in, and I'm able to shoot easily, and I don't have the worry of my thumb slipping off that paddle. Now that's the good thing. And these do come with two different size paddles, but to me, neither of them stick out far enough. I would like the paddles to stick out a little bit more from the body, just for my own personal preference, to have a much more, I guess, caveman access to that light. I don't want to have to be super specific. And these paddles are large. I would personally like to see them come out with a larger set, which I imagine that they will. Now, these paddles are easily replaced. You just take out a screw, you swap a paddle, you put the screw back in. And that's where I identified one of my problems. And I wanted it to be like, okay, this is going to be a sample size of one, but I actually saw it in a class with another student who had an EPL, one of the students I had in the class. And that was that, and I noticed it when I was shooting it on 10 millimeter, because like I said, I didn't just shoot it on 9. I put it on 9 millimeters, but I also mounted it on a 45, and I shot a lot of 10 mil throughout the initial 2,000 rounds. And then, of course, I went over that round count, using it in teaching in classes and just my own personal practice. So right now, I'm sitting close to 5,000 rounds on this thing, which is mostly 9 millimeter, but there's also 500 rounds of 45 ACP in there and 500 rounds of 10 mil. The issue that I identified is the screws were loosening up. And in fact, I had one screw come out and I lost the paddle. I was able to find it. And in the kit, there are extra screws, which was super helpful for me. And I was like, you know what? Maybe that's on me. That's my fault. That's my problem. I should have checked that, because usually I do check for torque and tightness before I start reviewing anything. So I went ahead and threw another screw in there and continued my review and didn't have any issues. I was teaching a class after I'd finished my initial 2,000 rounds, and I had a student who was shooting his on a 9 millimeter, and he had the same problem. So it's not a huge deal if you don't have one of these yet, or if you're going to get one, or if you just got one. I would go ahead and check the tightness on those paddle screws just to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. Maybe witness mark them if you have to. And that's one of the things, like, because we have quickly replaceable paddles, we have a potential failure point in that screw, so it's up to us as the end user to make sure it stays tight, because recoil is going to affect the tightness of that screw over time, depending on torque. And I could not find any recommended torque for those screws online anywhere, so probably throwing a little bit of thread locker on there would not be a bad idea. Performance of the light is fantastic, and that's not just saying, hey, I can turn it on at night when there's no other ambient lighting sources, no light barriers, and I can see my targets and I can hit steel at 100 with it. It's a handgun light, so that hotspot is intended for handgun purposes. Your general handgun distances are 0 to 25, although 30, 40, 50 is still realistic, although less likely. I like to put this thing kind of to standard and put it in different lighting conditions to see if PID is very possible. When teaching a class, a handgun low light instructor course using positive identification targets, and these targets vary. You can have them be shoot targets or no shoot targets, and the EPL performed fantastic in true darkness, but also with various lighting conditions introduced. Kind of showing you guys what I'm talking about is how this hybrid beam approaches the issue. I've got a lot of flood, which is important for my peripheral vision, but I still have a very usable hotspot for positive identification. Being able to PID a target at 5 yards, almost any light's going to be able to do that, even with light barriers. And the way that I usually do my test is I do darkness, and then I'll introduce intermediate lighting, which is lighting that's between me and the target. And then I'll do backlighting, usually a set of headlights on an SUV height vehicle, which does complicate things. I just use my truck. 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards, right around 20 yards, it takes a little bit of discernment. And in real life, I'd probably move my body around a little bit to see if I could get a better angle on that lighting condition. Because the worst case scenario is dark clothing and a dark object, be it a weapon or a cell phone or whatever they happen to be holding. But even at 25, I'm still getting good PID, and I still have the ability to kind of understand what I'm looking at. And again, if I wasn't sure, I wouldn't shoot. And that's the most important thing about positive identification. And this is kind of an isolation, because if it was a real life encounter, that person might be doing other things that would let you know if that was a weapon or not. But just looking at my own testing, I'm finding that the EPL is performing fantastically, especially for positive identification, which is my biggest concern. Now, I review everything on its own merits, so I'm not doing comparisons against other lights. But what I've seen, because I do teach a lot of low light classes and I see all kinds of different brands come through those classes, is we're getting close to a point of diminishing returns on these. If we go back 10 years, most lights would not give you good PID in an adverse environment past 15 yards. Some of them wouldn't even go that far. And there's some modern lights that won't go that far. Most of your TLR7, your flush lights, they don't really have the candela to punch out that far. And that's why candela is so important. These modern lights are performing really well at 20, 25, and further. And that's something that's fantastic for me, because it builds confidence in the technology, and it also gives you positive identification, which is important. We want to make sure, it's actually one of the cardinal rules, beware your target and what's beyond it, or however you word it. And that's not just a range safety rule, that's a real life rule. And that's important. So we want to make sure that our weapon lights can give us performance at those distances, because otherwise we either can't engage, we have to wait to engage, or we have to try to change our situation based on distance in order to be able to engage. Throughout the 2,000 rounds, I also left the EPL on guns that I was testing for other purposes, so it actually got quite a few drop tests as well. So my body's a little beat up, but you know, it builds character. And it gives me good confidence and good feedback on the overall electronics performance of the light. Also, the parts of the light that could potentially be a little bit more fragile, like the switches. Everything's been holding up really well. The battery's consistent, no flickering, no fading. The temperature's really good. And although, and this is just me personally, I would like the hotspot to be a little tighter for good visual control of a person at extended distances. I'm very happy with their performance, but I would like to see them release a head that I could swap out to give me a tighter hotspot. Because the flood is actually probably more than I feel like I need. And that's kind of a loaded statement, but I would give up a little bit of that flood to have a tighter hotspot, because I like to be able to take people's visual horizon away from them at greater distances. And the tighter your hotspot is, the further away someone can be from you, and you can still get good visual control putting that in their eyes. It's more of a handheld concern for some people, but I like that ability on a weapon light as well. Also, a tighter hotspot could potentially give me better PID at 30, 35, 40 yards if I had to confront those distances. And if the hotspot could be a little bit tighter, you might be able to throw this thing without any worries on a PCC, SMG, or even a rifle. So basically a quick summary on it. 2,000 rounds of my traditional evaluation testing, no issues. That was on 9mm, 45, and 10mm. The only problem, of course, I did have was that screw loosening up, and that's something I learned to watch for now. And after I fixed that problem and threw it back in there, I threw a little bit of purple Loctite on there. And I took the other side out and did that as well, made sure that they had a little bit of thread locker on them. The problem hasn't recreated itself, and we're thousands of rounds past when that happened. So I think it was a one-off, and same thing with that student's gun is maybe the way that they're coming from Cloud, they just need to be tightened up a little bit. Just something to watch for, but no issues going further from there. The light power has been consistent, like I said, no flickering or no fading, no performance issues whatsoever. So I think it's a win. Now, the question, of course, ultimately becomes, was it worth the wait? I think that this light provides some definitive value that you're not necessarily getting from some of the other lights that are out there. So on paper, the performance may be similar. You may see a similar candela rating, maybe see a similar lumens rating, but light temp is also a factor in that. And performance-wise, what are your features giving you? Ergonomics play into this, and I think that that's a factor as well. So before you make a decision on which light you're going to buy, if you're shopping for a new generation of weapon light, I try to put your hands on one of these and check out the ergonomics and see if they're going to align with you, especially for the particular type of firearm that you're going to use them on. But I think the EPL is definitely worth the wait. Till next time, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, train accordingly.